All right. It is coming up on 8 o'clock. So, let's settle in, get comfortable, and see what further misadventures we have in store from Don Quixote and the Myriad Gallery. Welcome back. This is our 8th night of reading from Cervantes' Don Quixote. We've had all sorts of interesting conflux of coincidences in the last reading. The madman out in the wilderness was found to be probably 1 degree removed from a lamenting maiden in the woods. Well, not really a maiden, but you understand. They were both wronged by the same villain of a nobleman, a duke's second son, in proper second son fashion. I think I may have misplaced where I should keep the model right now. I was doing some tweaking, and I think I'm a little too high, getting in the way of chat here. This should work. Yeah, that looks better to me. Alright, so yes, as I was saying, yeah, the stars were aligning. There was the coincidences were just piling up. But in the end, we were reunited with Don Quixote. We saw him come out of the woods, lamenting his own fate. Such as it was. All things in context, really. And he was found by Sancho. He was found by the curate, found by the barber, found by everyone. And just with a little bit of manipulation, it's nothing too bad. Just a little bit of something to convince him that there's a new quest. And that quest should take him maybe back to La Mancha, where he might be waylaid and thrown in an institution. We'll leave that up to continued developments. So, let's go ahead and see what tonight has in store, because it seems things may take some unexpected twists and turns. The plan, as always with Don Quixote, the plans never quite play out as intended. So, let's shift back to our little reading nook, and we'll see where the story will take us tonight. And so we resume now, with chapter 30, a nice round number to get us started, which treats of a dress displayed by the fair Dorothea, with other matters pleasant and amusing. Yes, hello, Simba. You are taking up the desk. The curate had hardly ceased speaking when Sancho said, "In faith, then, Signor Licensate, he who did that deed was my master, and it was not for want of my telling him beforehand and warning him to mind what he was about, and that it was a sin to set them at liberty, as they were all on the march there because they were special scoundrels." "Blockhead!" said Don Quixote at this. "It is no business or concern of knights errant to inquire whether any persons in affliction, in chains, or oppressed, that they may meet on the high roads, go that way and suffer as they do, because of their faults, or because of their misfortunes. It only concerns them to aid them, as persons in need of help, having regard to their sufferings, and not to their rascalities. I encountered a chaplet, a string of miserable and unfortunate people, and did for them what my sense of duty demands of me. And, as for the rest, be that as it may, and whoever takes objection to it, saving the sacred dignity of the Signor Licensate and his honoured person, I say he knows little about chivalry, and lies like a whoreson villain. And this I will give him to know to the fullest extent of my sword. And so saying, he settled himself in his stirrups, and pressed down his morion, or the barber's basin, which, according to him, was Mambrino's helmet. He carried hanging at the saddle-bow, until he could repair the damage done to it by the galley slaves. Dorothea, who was shrewd and sprightly, and by this time thoroughly understood Don Quixote's crazy turn, and that all except Sancho Panza were making game of him, not to be behind the rest, said to him on observing his irritation, "Sir Knight, remember the boon you have promised me, and that, in accordance with it, you must not engage in any other adventure, be it ever so pressing. Calm yourself, for if the licensed had known that the galley slaves had been set free by that unconquered arm, he would have stopped his mouth thrice over, or even bitten his tongue 3 times over before he would have said a word that tended towards disrespect of your worship." "That I swear heartily," said the curate, "and I would have even plucked off a moustache." "I will hold my peace, Signora," said Don Quixote, "and I will curb the natural anger that has arisen in my breast, and will proceed in peace and quietness until I have fulfilled my promise. But in return for this consideration, I entreat you to tell me, if you have no objection to do so, what is the nature of your trouble, and how many, who, and what are the persons of whom I am to require due satisfaction, and on whom I am to take vengeance on your behalf." "That I will do with all my heart," replied Dorothea, "if it will not be wearisome to you to hear of miseries and misfortunes." "It will not be wearisome, Signora," said Don Quixote, to which Dorothea replied, "Well, if that be so, give me your attention." As soon as she said this, Cardenio and the barber drew close to her side, eager to hear what sort of story the quick-witted Dorothea would invent for herself. And Sancho did the same, for he was as much taken in by her as his master. And she, having settled herself comfortably in the saddle, and with the help of coughing and other preliminaries, taken time to think, began with great sprightliness of manner in this fashion. "First of all, I would have you know, sirs, that my name is—" and here she stopped for a moment, for she forgot the name the curate had given her, but he came to her relief, seeing that what her difficulty was, and said, "It is no wonder, Signora, that your highness should be confused and embarrassed in telling the tale of your misfortunes, for such afflictions often have the effect of depriving the sufferers of memory, so that they do not even remember their own names, as is the case now with your ladyship, who has forgotten that she is called the Princess Micomicona, lawful heiress of the great kingdom of Micomicon. And with this cue, your highness may now recall to your sorrowful recollection all you may wish to tell us." "That is the truth," said the damsel, "but I think from this on I shall have no need of any prompting, and I shall bring my true story safe into port. And here it is. The king, my father, who was called Tinacrio the Sapient, was very learned in what they call magic arts, and became aware by his craft that my mother, who was called Queen Jeremila, was to die before he did, and that soon after he too was to depart this life, and I was to be left an orphan, without father or mother. All this, he declared, did not so much grieve or distress him as his certain knowledge that a prodigious giant, the lord of a great island close to our kingdom, Pandafilando of the Scowl by name, for it is averred that though his eyes are properly placed and straight, he always looks askew, as if he squinted, and this he does out of malignity, to strike fear and terror into those he looks at. That he knew, I say, that this giant, on becoming aware of my orphan condition, would overrun my kingdom with a mighty force and strip me of all, not leaving me even a small village to shelter me, but that I could avoid all this ruin and misfortune if I were willing to marry him. However, as far as he could see, he never expected that I would consent to a marriage so unequal, and he said no more than the truth in this, for it has never entered my mind to marry that giant, or any other, let him be ever so great or enormous. My father said, too, that when he was dead, and I saw Pandafilando about to invade my kingdom, I was not to wait and attempt to defend myself, for that would be destructive to me, but that I should leave the kingdom entirely open to him.
if I wished to avoid the death and total destruction of my good and loyal vassals, for there would be no possibility of defending myself against the giant's devilish power, and that I should at once, with some of my followers, set out for Spain, where I should obtain relief in my distress on finding a certain knight-errant, whose fame, by that time, would extend over the whole kingdom, and who would be called, if I remember rightly, Don Azote, or Don Quixote.
Don Quixote, he must have said, Signora, observed Sancho at this, otherwise called the Knight of the Rueful Countenance.
That is it, said Dorothea. He said, moreover, that he would be tall of stature and lank-featured, and that on his right side, under the left shoulder, or thereabouts, he would have a grey mole with hairs like bristles.
On hearing this, Don Quixote said to his squire, Here, Sancho, my son, bear a hand and help me to strip, for I want to see if I am the knight that sage king foretold.
What does your worship want to strip for? Said Dorothea.
To see if I have that mole your father spoke of, answered Don Quixote. There is no occasion to strip, said Sancho, for I know your worship has just such a mole on the middle of your backbone, which is the mark of a strong man.
That is enough, said Dorothea, for with friends we must not look too closely into trifles, and whether it be on the shoulder or on the backbone matters little. It is enough, if there is a mole, be it where it may, for it is all the same flesh. No doubt my good father hit the truth in every particular, and I have made a lucky hit in commending myself to Don Quixote, for he is the one my father spoke of, as the features of his countenance correspond with those assigned to this knight by that wide fame he has acquired not only in Spain, but in all La Mancha. For I had scarcely landed at Osuna when I heard such accounts of his achievements, that at once my heart told me he was the very one I had come in search of.
But how did you land at Osuna, Signora? Asked Don Quixote, when it is not a seaport.
But before Dorothea could reply, the curate anticipated her, saying,
The princess meant to say that after she had landed at Malaga, the first place where she heard of your worship was Osuna.
That is what I meant to say, said Dorothea.
And that would be only natural, said the curate. Will your majesty please proceed?
There is no more to add, said Dorothea, save that in finding Don Quixote, I have had such good fortune that I already reckon and regard myself queen and mistress of my entire dominions, since of his courtesy and magnanimity he has granted me the boon of accompanying me whithersoever I may conduct him, which will be only to bring him face to face with Pandafilando of the Scowl, that he may slay him and restore to me what has been unjustly usurped by him. For all this must come to pass satisfactorily, since my good father Tenaclio the Sapient foretold it, who likewise left it declared in writing, in Chaldee, or Greek characters, for I cannot read them, that if this predicted knight, after having cut the giant's throat, should be disposed to marry me, I was to offer myself at once, without demur, as his lawful wife, and yield him possession of my kingdom together with my person.
What thinkest thou now, friend Sancho? Said Don Quixote at this. Hearest thou that? Did I not tell thee so? See how we have already got a kingdom to govern and a queen to marry. On my oath it is so, said Sancho, and foul fortune to him who won't marry after slitting Signor Pandahilado's windpipe. And then, how ill-favoured the queen is. I wish the fleas in my bed were that sort.
And so saying, he cut a couple of capers in the air with every sign of extreme satisfaction, and then ran to seize the bridle of Dorothea's mule, and, checking it, fell on his knees before her, begging her to give him her hand to kiss in token of his acknowledgment of her as his queen and mistress. Which of the bystanders could have helped laughing to see the madness of the master and the simplicity of the servant? Dorothea therefore gave her hand, and promised to make him a great lord in her kingdom, when heaven should be so good as to permit her to recover and enjoy it, for which Sancho returned thanks in words that set them all laughing again. This, sirs, continued Dorothea, is my story. It only remains to tell you that, of all the attendants I took with me from my kingdom, I have none left, except this well-bearded squire, for all were drowned in a great tempest we encountered when in sight of port, and he and I came to land on a couple of planks, as if by a miracle. and indeed the whole course of my life is a miracle and a mystery, as you may have observed. And if I have been over-minute in any respect, or not as precise as I ought, let it be accounted for by what the licensate said at the beginning of my tale, that constant and excessive troubles deprive the sufferers of their memory. They shall not deprive me of mine, exalted and worthy princess, said Don Quixote, however great and unexampled those which I shall endure in your service may be, and here I confirm anew the boon I have promised you, and I swear to go with you to the end of the world, until I find myself in the presence of your fierce enemy, whose haughty head I trust by the aid of my arm to cut off with the edge of this, I will not say good sword, thanks to Jean de Passemont who carried away mine. This he said between his teeth, and then continued, and when it has been cut off, and you have been put in peaceful possession of your realm, it shall be left to your own decision to dispose of your person as may be most pleasing to you. For so long as my memory is occupied, my will enslaved, and my understanding enthralled by her, I say no more. It is impossible for me, for a moment, to contemplate marriage, even with a phoenix. The last words of his master about not wanting to marry were so disagreeable to Sancho that, raising his voice, he exclaimed with great irritation, "By my oath, Señor Don Quixote, you are not in your right senses. For how can you, your worship, possibly object to marrying such an exalted princess as this? Do you think fortune will offer you behind every stone such a piece of luck as is offered you now? Is my lady Dulcinea fairer, perchance? Not she, nor half as fair. And I will even go so far as to say she does not come up to the shoe of this one here. A poor chance I have of getting that county I am waiting for, if your worship goes looking for dainties in the bottom of the sea. In the devil's name, marry, and take this kingdom that comes to hand without any trouble. And when you are king, make me a marquis or governor of a province, and for the rest, let the devil take it all." Don Quixote, when he heard such blasphemies uttered against his lady Dulcinea, could not endure it, and lifting his pike, without saying anything to Sancho or uttering a word, he gave him 2 such thwacks that he brought him to the ground. And had it not been that Dorothea cried out to him to spare him, he would have no doubt taken his life on the spot. "Do you think," he said to him after a pause, "you scurvy clown, that you are to be always interfering with me, and that you are to be always offending, and I always pardoning? Don't fancy it, impious scoundrel, for that beyond a doubt thou art, since thou hast set thy tongue going against the peerless Dulcinea. Know you not, lout, vagabond, beggar, that were it not for the might that she infuses into my arm, I should not have strength enough to kill a flea? Say, scoffer with a viper's tongue, what think you has won this kingdom, cut off this giant's head, and made you a marquis? For all this I count as already accomplished and decided. But the might of Dulcinea, employing my arm as the instrument of her achievements. She fights in me, and conquers in me, and I live and breathe in her, and owe my life and being to her. Oh, whoreson scoundrel, how ungrateful you are! You see yourself raised from the dust of the earth to be a titled lord, and the return you make for so great a benefit is to speak evil of her who has conferred it upon you." Sancho was not so stunned, but that he heard all his master said, and, rising with some degree of nimbleness, he ran to place himself behind Dorothea's palfrey, and from that position he said to his master, "Tell me, Signor, if your worship is resolved not to marry this great princess, it is plain the kingdom will not be yours. And, not being so, how can you bestow favours upon me? That is what I complain of. Let your worship at any rate marry this queen, now that we have got her here as if showered down from heaven, and afterwards you may go back to my lady Dulcinea, for there must have been kings in the world who kept mistresses. As to beauty, I have nothing to do with it, and if the truth is to be told, I like them both, though I have never seen the lady Dulcinea." "How? Never seen her? Blasphemous traitor!" exclaimed Don Quixote. "Hast thou not just now brought me a message from her?" "Oh, I mean," said Sancho,
if I did not see her so much as my leisure that I could take particular notice of her beauty, or of her charms piecemeal, but taken in the lump, I like her.
Now I forgive thee, said Don Quixote, and do thou forgive me the injury I have done thee, for our first impulses are not in our control.
That I see, replied Sancho, and with me the wish to speak is always the first impulse. And I cannot help saying, once at any rate, that what I have on the tip of my tongue.
For all that, Sancho, said Don Quixote, take heed of what thou sayest, for the pitcher goes so often to the well. I need say no more to thee.
Well, well, said Sancho, God is in heaven and sees all tricks, and will judge who does most harm, I in not speaking right, or your worship in not doing it.
That is enough, said Dorothea. Run, Sancho, and kiss your lord's hand and beg his pardon, and henceforward be more circumspect with your praise and abuse, and say nothing in disparagement of that Lady Toboso, of whom I know nothing save that I am her servant, and put your trust in God, for you will not fail to obtain some dignity so as to live like a prince. Sancho advanced, hanging his head, and begged his master's hand, which Don Quixote with dignity presented to him, giving him his blessing as soon as he had kissed it. He then bade him go on ahead a little, as he had questions to ask him, and matters of great importance to discuss with him. Sancho obeyed, and when the two had gone some distance in advance, Don Quixote said to him, Since thy return, I have had no opportunity or time to ask thee many particulars touching thy mission, and the answer thou hast brought back. And now that chance has granted us the time and opportunity, deny me not the happiness thou canst give me by such good news.
Let your worship ask what you will, answered Sancho, for I will find a way out of all, as I found a way in. But I implore you, Signor, not to be so revengeful in future.
Why dost thou say that, Sancho? Said Don Quixote.
I say it, he returned, because those blows just now were more because of the quarrel the devil stirred up between us, both the other night, than for what I said against my lady Dulcinea, whom I love and reverence as I would a relic, though there is nothing of that about her, merely as something belonging to your worship.
Say no more on that subject for thy life, Sancho, said Don Quixote, for it is displeasing to me. I have already pardoned thee for that, and thou knowest the common saying, for a fresh sin, a fresh penance.
While this was going on, they saw, coming along the road they were following, a man mounted on an ass, who, when he came close, seemed to be a gypsy. But Sancho Panza, whose eyes and heart were there wherever he saw asses,
I know, it's just a translation.
I know it. But Sancho, my man. But Sancho Panza, whose eyes and heart were there wherever he saw asses, no sooner beheld the man than he knew him to be Jean de Passamont, and by the thread of the gypsy he got at the ball, his ass, for it was in fact Dapple that carried Passamont, who, to escape recognition and to sell the ass, had disguised himself as a gypsy, being able to speak the gypsy language, and many more, as well as if they were his own. Sancho saw him and recognized him, and the instant he did so, he shouted to him, Ginesillo, you thief! Give up my treasure! Release my life! Embarrass thyself not with my repose! Quit my ass! Leave my delight! Be off! Rip! Get thee gone, thief, and give up what is not thine! There was no necessity for so many words or obturations, for at the first one, Jean jumped down, and at a like racing speed, made off, and got clear of them all. Sancho hastened to his Dapple, and embracing him said, How hast thou fared, my blessing, Dapple of my eyes, my comrade? All the while kissing him and caressing him as if he were a human being. The ass held his peace, and let himself be kissed and caressed by Sancho without answering a single word. They all came up and congratulated him on having found Dapple, Don Quixote especially, who told him that, notwithstanding this, he would not cancel the order for the 3 ass colts, for which Sancho thanked him. While the 3 had been going along, conversing in this fashion,
The curate observed to Dorothea that she had shown great cleverness, as well in the story itself as in the conciseness and the resemblance it bore to those of the books of chivalry. She said that she had many times amused herself reading them, but that she did not know the situation of the provinces or seaports, and so she had said at haphazard that she had landed at Osuna.
So I saw, said the curate, and for that reason I made haste to say what I did, by which it was all set right. But is it not a strange thing to see how readily this unhappy gentleman believes all these figments and lies, simply because they are in the style and manner of the absurdities and of his books?
So it is, said Cardenio, and so uncommon and unexampled, that were one to attempt to invent and concoct it in fiction, I doubt if there would be any wit keen enough to imagine it. Oh yes, yes, go ahead, Cervantes. Let the meta flow through you.
But another thing about it, a strange thing about it, said the curate, is that, apart from the silly things which this worthy gentleman says in connection with his craze, when other subjects are dealt with, he can discuss them in a perfectly rational manner, showing that his mind is quite clear and composed, so that, provided his chivalry is not touched upon, no one would take him to be anything but a man of thoroughly sound understanding.
While they were holding this conversation, Don Quixote continued his with Sancho, saying,
Friend Panza, let us forgive and forget as to our quarrels. And tell me now, dismissing anger and irritation, where, how, and when didst thou find Dulcinea? What was she doing? What didst thou say to her? What did she answer? How did she look when she was reading my letter? Who copied it out for thee? And everything in the manner that seems to thee worth knowing, asking and learning, neither adding nor falsifying to give me pleasure, nor yet curtailing, lest you should deprive me of it.
Signor, replied Sancho, if the truth is to be told, nobody copied out the letter for me, for I carried no letter at all.
It is as thou sayest, said Don Quixote, for the notebook in which I wrote it I found in my own possession 2 days after thy departure, which gave me very great vexation, as I knew not what thou wouldst do on finding himself without any letter, and I made sure thou wouldst return from the place where thou didst first miss it.
So I should have done, said Sancho, if I had not got it by heart when your worship read it to me, so that I repeated it to a sacristan, who copied it out for me from hearing it. So exactly that he said in all the days of his life, though he had read many a letter of excommunication, he had never seen or read so pretty a letter as that.
And hast thou got it still in thy memory, Sancho? Said Don Quixote.
No, Signor, replied Sancho, for as soon as I had repeated it, seeing there was no further use for it, I set about forgetting it, and if I recollect any of it, it is that about scrubbing. I mean to say, sovereign lady, and the end yours till death, and the night of the rueful countenance. And between these two, I put into it more than 300 my souls, and my lives, and my eyes.
all right, that brings us to the end of chapter 30. So, Sancho has been reunited with his mule, his beloved ass, and seemingly, it appears that Don Quixote is, he may have the wool pulled over his eyes. We'll see. There's a little bit more to be had. It looks like this conversation is going to continue for a little while. So, let's see where things will go next with chapter 31. Before we do continue, every chapter continues to grow my fondness for the dynamic between Sancho and Don Quixote. They are perfect for each other. They're both awful to each other in very many ways, but they play off each other so very, very well. It's really satisfying to see. They just somehow they manage to continue to just be their own worst enemies and each other's worst enemies while maintaining the semblance of a friendship. It's kind of like, have you seen Always Sunny in Philadelphia? It's a lot like that dynamic. They're just awful to each other, and it's in a very wholesome sort of way. Well, okay, Always Sunny is less wholesome, but you know what I mean. Alright, so let's continue on with chapter 31 of the delectable discussion between Don Quixote and Sancho Panza, his squire, together with other incidents.
All that is not unsatisfactory to me, said Don Quixote. Go on, thou didst reach her, and what was that Queen of Beauty doing? Surely thou didst find her stringing pearls, or embroidering some device in gold thread for this her enslaved knight?
I did not, said Sancho, but I found her winnowing 2 bushels of wheat in the yard of her house.
Then depend upon it, said Don Quixote, the grains of that wheat were pearls when touched by her hands. And didst thou look, friend? Was it white wheat or brown?
It was neither, but red, said Sancho.
Then I promise thee, said Don Quixote, that, winnowed by her hands beyond a doubt, the bread it made was of the whitest. But go on. When thou gavest her my letter, did she kiss it? Did she place it on her head? Did she perform any ceremony befitting it? Or what did she do?
When I went to give it to her, replied Sancho, she was hard at it, swaying from side to side with a lot of wheat she had in the sieve, and she said to me, lay the letter, friend, on the top of that sack, for I cannot read it until I have done sifting all this.
Discreet lady, said Don Quixote, that was in order to read it at her leisure and enjoy it. Proceed, Sancho. While she was engaged in her occupation, what converse did she hold with thee? What did she ask about me? And what answer didst thou give? Make haste, tell me all, and let not an atom be left behind in the ink bottle.
She asked me nothing, said Sancho, but I told her how your worship was left doing penance in her service, naked from the waist up, in among these mountains like a savage, sleeping on the ground, not eating bread off a tablecloth, nor combing your beard, weeping and cursing your fortune.
In saying I cursed my fortune, thou saidst wrong, said Don Quixote, for rather do I bless it, and shall bless it in all the days of my life, for having made me worthy of aspiring to love so lofty a lady as Dulcinea del Toboso.
And so lofty she is, said Sancho, that she overtops me by more than a hand's breadth.
What, Sancho, said Don Quixote, didst thou measure with her?
I measured in this way, said Sancho. Going to help her put a sack of wheat on the back of an ass. We came so close together that I could see she stood more than a good palm over me.
Well, said Don Quixote, and doth she not of a truth accompany and adorn this greatness with 1,000,000,000 charms of mind? But one thing thou wilt not deny, Sancho, when thou camest close to her, didst thou not perceive a Sabaean odour? An aromatic fragrance, I know not what, delicious that I cannot find a name for. I mean, a redolence, an exhalation, as if thou wert in the shop of some dainty glover.
All I can say is, said Sancho, that I did perceive a little odour, something goaty. It must have been that she was all in a sweat with hard work.
It could be that, said Don Quixote, but thou must have been suffering from cold in the head. Or must have smelt thyself, for I know well what would be the scent of that rose among thorns, that lily of the field, that dissolved amber.
Maybe so, replied Sancho. There often comes from myself that same odour, which then seemed to me to come from her grace the Lady Dulcinea. But that's no wonder, for one devil is like another.
Well then, continued Don Quixote, now she has done sifting the corn and sent it to the mill. What did she do when she read the letter?
As for the letter, said Sancho, she did not read it, for she said she could neither read nor write. Instead of that, she tore it up into small pieces, saying that she did not want to let anyone read it, lest her secrets should become known in the village, and that But I had told her by word of mouth about your love and your worship of her, and the extraordinary penance you were doing for her sake was enough. And, to make an end of it, she told me to tell your worship that she kissed your hands, and that she had a greater desire to see you than to write you, and that therefore she entreated and commanded you, on sight of this present, to come out of these thickets, and to have done with carrying on absurdities, and to set out at once for El Toboso, unless something else of greater importance should happen, for she had a great desire to see your worship. She laughed greatly when I told her how your worship was called the Knight of the Rueful Countenance. I asked her if that Biscayan the other day had been there, and she told me he had, and that he was an honest fellow. I asked her too about the galley slaves, but she said she had not seen any as yet.
So far all goes well, said Don Quixote. But tell me, what jewel was it that she gave thee on taking thy leave, in return for thy tidings of me? For it is a usual and ancient custom with knights and ladies errant to give the squires, damsels, or dwarfs who bring tidings of their ladies to the knights, or of their knights to the ladies, some rich jewel as a guerdon for good news, and acknowledgment of the message.
That is very likely, said Sancho, and a good custom it was, to my mind. But that must have been in days gone by, for now it would seem to be the custom only to give a piece of bread and cheese, because that was what my lady Dulcinea gave me over the top of the yard wall when I took leave of her, and more by token it was sheep's milk cheese.
She is generous in the extreme, said Don Quixote, and if she did not give thee a jewel of gold, no doubt it must have been because she had not one to hand to give thee. But sleeves are good after Easter. I shall see her, and all that shall be made right. But knowest thou what amazes me, Sancho? It seems to me thou must have gone and come through the air, for thou hast taken but little more than 3 days to go to El Toboso and return. It is more than 30 leagues from here to there, from which I am inclined to think that the sage magician who is my friend and watches over my interests, for of necessity there is and must be one, or else I should not be a right knight-errant, that this same, I say, must have helped thee to travel without thy knowledge. For some of these sages will catch up a knight-errant sleeping in his bed, and without his knowing how, or in what way it happened, he wakes up the next day more than 1,000 leagues away from the place where he went to sleep. And if it were not for this, knights-errant would not be able to give aid to one another in peril, as they do at every turn. For a knight, maybe, is fighting in the mountains of Armenia with some dragon or fierce serpent, or another knight, and gets the worst of the battle, and is at the point of death. But when he looks for it, there appears over against him on a cloud or chariot of fire another knight, a friend of his who just before had been in England, and who takes his part and delivers him from death. And at night he finds himself in his own quarters, supping very much to his satisfaction, and yet from one place to the other will have been 2,000 or 3,000 leagues. And all this is done by the craft and skill of the sage enchanters who take care of those valiant knights, so that, friend Sancho, I find no difficulty in believing that thou mayest have gone from this place to El Toboso and returned in such a short time, since, as I have said, some friendly sage must have carried thee through the air without thee perceiving it.
That must have been it, said Sancho, for indeed Rocinante went like a gypsy's ass, with quicksilver in his ears.
Quicksilver, said Don Quixote. Aye, and what is more, a legion of devils, folk that can travel and make others travel without being weary, exactly as the whim seizes them. But putting this aside, what thinkest thou I ought to do about my lady's command to go and see her? For though I feel that I am bound to obey her mandate, I feel too that I am debarred by the boon I have accorded to the princess that accompanies us, and the law of chivalry compels me to have regard for my word in preference to my inclination. On the one hand, the desire to see my lady pursues and harasses me. On the other, my solemn promise, and the glory I shall win in this enterprise urge and call me. But what I think I shall do is to travel with all speed and reach quickly the place where this giant is. And on my arrival I shall cut off his head and establish the princess peacefully in her realm. And forthwith I shall return to behold the light that lightens my senses, to whom I shall make such excuses that she will be led to approve of my delay, for she will see that it entirely tends to increase her glory and fame. for all that I have won, am winning, or shall win, by arms in this life, comes to me of the favour she extends to me, and because I am hers.
Oh, what a sad state your worship's brains are in, said Sancho. Tell me, Signor, do you mean to travel all that way for nothing, and to let slip and lose so rich and great a match as this, where they give it as a portion a kingdom that in sober truth I have heard say is more than 20,000 leagues round about, and abounds with all things necessary to support human life, and is bigger than Portugal and Castile put together? Peace! For the love of God, blush for what you have said, and take my advice, and forgive me, and marry at once in the first village where there is a curate. If not, here is our licensate who will do the business beautifully. Remember, I am old enough to give advice, and this I am giving comes pat to the purpose. For a sparrow in the hand is better than a vulture on the wing, and he who has the good to his hand and chooses the bad, that the good he complains of may not come to him.
Look here, Sancho, said Don Quixote, if thou art advising me to marry, in order that immediately on slaying the giant I may become king, and be able to confer favours on thee, and give thee what I have promised, let me tell thee I shall be able very easily to satisfy thy desires without marrying. Before going into battle, I will make it a stipulation that, if I come out of it victorious, even if I do not marry, they shall give me a portion of the kingdom, that I may bestow it upon whomsoever I choose. And when they give it to me, upon whom wouldst thou have me bestow it, but upon thee?
Oh, that is plain speaking, said Sancho, but let your worship take care to choose it on the sea-coast, so that, if I don't like the life, I may be able to ship off my black vassals and deal with them as I have said. Don't mind going to see my lady Dulcinea now, but go and kill this giant and let us finish off this business, for by God it strikes me it will be one of great honour and great profit.
I forgot about Sancho's plans for the theoretical vassals. Oh, Sancho. Oh, Sancho.
I hold thou art in the right of it, Sancho, said Don Quixote, and I will take thy advice as to accompanying the princess before going to see Dulcinea. But I counsel thee not to say anything to anyone, or to those who are with us, about what we have considered and discussed. For as Dulcinea is so decorous that she does not wish her thoughts to be known, it is not right that I, or anyone, for me, should disclose them.
Well then, if that be so, said Sancho, how is it that your worship makes all those you overcome by your arm go to present themselves before my lady Dulcinea? This being the same thing as signing your name to it that you love her and are her lover? And as those who go must perforce kneel before her and say they come from your worship to submit themselves to her, how can the thoughts of both of you be hid?
Oh, how silly and simple thou art, said Don Quixote. Seest thou not, Sancho, that this tends to a greater exaltation? For thou must know that according to our way of thinking in chivalry, it is a high honour to a lady to have many knights errant in her service, whose thoughts never go beyond serving her for her own sake, and who look for no other reward for their great and true devotion, than that she should be willing to accept them as her knights.
It is with that kind of love, said Sancho. I have heard preachers say we ought to love our Lord, for himself alone, without being moved by the hope of glory or the fear of punishment. Though, for my part, I would rather love and serve him for what he could do.
The devil take thee for a clown, said Don Quixote, and what shrewd things thou sayest at times. One would think thou hadst studied.
In faith, then, I cannot even read.
Master Nicholas here called out to them to wait a while, as they wanted to halt and drink at a little spring there was there. Don Quixote drew up not a little to the satisfaction of Sancho, for he was by this time wary of telling so many lies, and in dread of his master catching him tripping, for though he knew that Dulcinea was a peasant girl of El Toboso, he had never seen her in all his life. Cardenio had now put on the clothes which Dorothea was wearing when they found her, and though they were not very good, they were far better than those he put off. They dismounted together by the side of the spring, and with what the curate had provided himself with at the inn, they appeased, though not very well, the keen appetite they all of them brought with them. While they were so employed, there happened to come by a youth passing on his way, who, stopping to examine the party at the spring, the next moment ran to Don Quixote, and clasping him round the legs, began to weep freely, saying, "Oh, Signor, do you not know me? Look at me well. I am that lad Andres that your worship released from the oak tree where I was tied." "Oh, okay, yeah, I remember that kid." Don Quixote recognized him, and, taking his hand, he turned to those present and said, "That your worships may see how important it is to have knights errant to redress the wrongs and injuries done by tyrannical and wicked men in this world. I may tell you that some days ago, passing through a wood, I heard cries and piteous complaints as of a person in pain and distress. I immediately hastened, impelled by my bounden duty, to the quarter whence the plaintive accents seemed to me to proceed, and I found, tied to an oak, this lad who now stands before you, which in my heart I rejoice at, for his testimony will not permit me to depart from the truth in any particular. He was, I say, tied to an oak, naked from the waist up, and a clown, whom I afterwards found to be his master, scarifying him by lashes with the reins of his mare. As soon as I saw him, I asked the reason of so cruel a flagellation. The boor replied that he was flogging him because he was his servant, and because of carelessness that proceeded rather from dishonesty than stupidity. On which this boy said, "Signor, he flogs me only because I ask for my wages." The master made I know not what speeches and explanations, which, though I listened to them, I did not accept. In short, I compelled the clown to unbind him, and to swear he would take him with him, and pay him real by real, and perfumed into the bargain. Is not all this true, Andre, my son? Didst thou not mark with what authority I commanded him, and with what humility he promised to do all I enjoined, specified, and required of him? Answer without hesitation. Tell these gentlemen what took place, that they may see that it is as great an advantage as I say to have knights errant abroad." "All that your worship has said is quite true," answered the lad, "but the end of the business turned out just the opposite of what your worship supposes." "How? The opposite?" said Don Quixote. "Did not the clown pay thee then?" "Not only did he not pay me," replied the lad, "but as soon as your worship had passed out of the wood and we were alone, he tied me up again to the same oak and gave me a fresh flogging. It left me like a flayed St. Bartholomew, and every stroke he gave me he followed up with some jest or jibe about having made a fool of your worship. And, but for the pain I was suffering, I should have laughed at the things he said. In short, he left me in such a condition that I have been until now in a hospital, getting cured of the injuries which that rascally clown inflicted on me then. For all which your worship is to blame. For if you had gone your own way, and not come there where there was no call for you, nor meddled into other people's affairs, my master would have been content with giving me 1 or 2 dozen lashes, and would then have loosed me and paid me what he owed me. But when your worship abused him so out of measure, and gave him so many hard words, his anger was kindled, and as soon as he could not revenge himself on you, as soon as he saw you had left him, the storm burst upon me in such a way, I feel as if I should never be a man again."
"The mischief," said Don Quixote, "lay in my going away, for I should not have gone until I had seen thee paid, because I ought to have known, well by long experience, that there is no clown who will keep his word if he finds it will not suit him to keep it. But thou rememberest, Andre, that I swore, if he did not pay thee, I would go and seek him, and find him, though he were to hide himself in the whale's belly."
"That is true," said Andre, "but it was of no use."
"Thou shalt see now whether it is of use or not," said Don Quixote.
And so saying, he got up hastily, and bade Sancho bridle Rocinante, who was browsing while they were eating. Dorothea asked him what he meant to do. He replied that he meant to go in search of this clown and chastise him for such iniquitous conduct, and see Andre paid to the last maravedi, despite and in the teeth of all the clowns in the world. To which she replied that he must remember that in accordance with his promise, he could not engage in any enterprise until he had concluded hers, and that as he knew this better than anyone, he should restrain his ardor until his return from her kingdom.
That is true, said Don Quixote, and Andre must have patience until my return, as you say, Signora. But I once more swear and promise not to stop until I have seen him avenged and paid.
I have no faith in those oaths, said Andre. I would rather have now something to help me to get to Seville, rather than all the revenges in the world. If you have here anything to eat that I can take with me, give it me. And God be with your worship and all knights errant, and may their errands turn out as well for themselves as they have for me. Sancho took out from his store a piece of bread and another of cheese, and giving them to the lad, he said,
Here, take this, Brother Andre, for we have, all of us, a share in your misfortune.
Why, what share have you got?
This share of bread and cheese I am giving you, answered Sancho, and God knows whether I shall feel the want of it myself or not. For I would have you know, friend, that we squires to knight-errant have to bear a great deal of hunger and hard fortune, and even other things more easily felt than told.
Andre seized his bread and cheese, and seeing that nobody gave him anything more, bent his head, and took hold of the road, as the saying is. However, before leaving, he said, For the love of God, Sir Knight-errant, if you ever meet me again, though you may see them cutting me to pieces, give me no aid or succor, but leave me to my misfortune, which will not be so great, but that a greater will come to me if by being helped by your worship, on whom, and all the knights-errant that have ever been born, God send his curse.
Damn.
Don Quixote was getting up to chastise him, but he took to his heels at such a pace that no one attempted to follow him. And mightily chapfallen was Don Quixote at Andre's story, and the others had to take great care to restrain their laughter, so as to not put him entirely out of countenance. All right, that brings us to the end of chapter 31. So, we've been reunited with, I think that was the first of Don Quixote's misadventures. The second. It was right after he was knighted. Because he was knighted at the inn, and, such as it was, and, found Andre in the woods. So, the first post-knighting adventure. And it has certainly come back in not a spectacular way. We saw it coming, because we, as the readers, were given that wonderful perspective after Don Quixote had left, but I was not expecting it to be shown directly and thrown in Don Quixote's face how poorly that affair went after he had left. It's a little bit of a downer as he's going off on a new quest, but it is probably for the greater good. He needs to realize, well, we think he needs to realize that his actions have consequences, but I'm reasonably sure that he will never learn that lesson. No. In fact, this will probably just embolden him to continue on his own misadventures and ill-advised meddling. Alright guys, it's a little bit before the hour, but let's go ahead and take a short break here because the next chapter is about of a length as the last couple, and we'll definitely run over if we don't. So, let's go ahead and take a few minutes, top up our drinks, stretch our legs, and we'll be back in just a little while to continue from chapter 32 of Don Quixote. All right, we are back. Zoe's wandered away. So, we've seen some returning characters and some ventures and misadventures that we've seen. One of the original Don Quixote encounters, shall we say, has come back to roost, and the poor Andre did not go so well for it, and doesn't think too highly of his savior. But there is time yet for some new adventures, as he goes to the relief of the Princess Micomicona. Dorothea. So, let's see where things will go from here. With chapter 32, which treats of what befell Don Quixote's party at the inn. Their dainty repast being finished, they saddled at once, and without any adventure worth mentioning, they reached the next day the inn, the object of Sancho Panza's fear and dread. But though he would have rather not entered it, there was no help for it. The landlady, the landlord, their daughter, and Maritornes, when they saw Don Quixote and Sancho coming, went out to welcome them, with signs of hearty satisfaction, which Don Quixote received with dignity and gravity, and bade them make up a better bed for him than the last time. To which the landlady replied that if he paid better than he did the last time, she would give him one fit for a prince. Don Quixote said he would, so they made up a tolerable one for him in the same garret as before, and he lay down at once, being sorely shaken and in want of sleep. No sooner was the door shut upon him than the landlady made at the barber, and seizing him by the beard said, "By my faith, you are not going to make a beard of my tail any longer. You must give me back my tail, for it is a shame the way the thing of my poor husband's goes tossing about on the floor. I mean the comb that I used to stick in my good tail." But for all she tugged at it, the barber would not give it up, until the licensant told him to let her have it, as there was now no further occasion for that stratagem, because he might declare himself and appear in his own character, and tell Don Quixote that he had fled to this inn when those thieves, the galley slaves, robbed him, and should he ask for the princess's squire, they could tell him that she had sent him on before her to give notice of the people of her kingdom that she was coming, and bring with her the deliverer of them all. On this the barber cheerfully restored the tail to the landlady, and at the same time they returned all the accessories they had borrowed to effect Don Quixote's deliverance. All the people of the inn were struck with astonishment at the beauty of Dorothea, and even at the comely figure of the shepherd Cardenio. The curate made them get ready such fare as there was in the inn, and the landlord, in hope of better payment, served them up a tolerably good dinner. All this time Don Quixote was asleep, and they thought it best not to waken him, as sleeping would now do him more good than eating. While at dinner, the company, consisting of the landlord, his wife, their daughter, Maritornes, and all the travelers, they discussed the strange craze of Don Quixote, and the manner in which he had been found, and the lady told them what had taken place between him and the carrier, and then, looking round to see if Sancho was there, when she saw he was not, she gave them the whole story of his blanketing, which they received with no little amusement. But on the curate observing that it was the books of chivalry which Don Quixote had read that had turned his brain, the landlord said, "I cannot understand how that can be, for in truth to my mind there is no better reading in the world, and I have here 2 or 3 of them, with other writings that are the very life, not only of myself, but of plenty more. For when it is harvest time, the reapers flock here on holidays, and there is always one among them who can read and who takes up one of these books, and we gather round him, 30 or more of us, and stay listening to him with a delight that makes our grey hairs grow young again. At least, I can say for myself, that when I hear of what furious and terrible blows the knights deliver, I am seized with a longing to do the same. I would like to be hearing about them night and day." "And I just as much," said the landlady, "because I never,
have a quiet moment in my house except when you are listening to someone reading. For then you are so taken up that for the time being, you forget to scold."
"That is true," said Meritornes, "and faith, I relish hearing these things greatly too, for they are very pretty, especially when they describe some lady or other in the arms of her knight under the orange trees, and the duenna who is keeping watch for them half dead with envy and fright. All this, I say, is as good as honey."
"And you, what do you think, young lady?"
said the curate, turning to the landlord's daughter.
I don't know indeed, signor," said she. "I listen too, and to tell the truth, though I do not understand it, I like hearing it. But it is not the blows that my father likes that I like, but the laments the knights utter when they are separated from their ladies, and indeed they sometimes make me weep with the pity I feel for them." "Then you would console them, if it was for you they wept, young lady?" said Dorothea. "I don't know what I should do," said the girl. "I only know that there are some of those ladies so cruel that they call their knights tigers and lions and 1,000 other foul names, and Jesus! I don't know what sort of folk they can be so unfeeling and heartless, that rather than bestow a glance upon a worthy man, they leave him to die or go mad. I don't know what is the good of such prudery. If it is for honor's sake, why not marry them? That's all they want."
"Hush, child," said the landlady. "It seems to me thou knowest a great deal about these things, and it is not fit for girls to know or talk so much."
"As the gentleman asked me, I could not help answering him," said the girl.
"Well then," said the curate, "bring me these books, Signor Landlord, for I should like to see them."
"With all my heart,"
said he, and going into his own room, he brought out an old valise secured with a little chain, on opening which the curate found in it 3 large books and some manuscripts, written in a very good hand. The first that he opened he found to be Don Cirongilio of Thrace, and the second Don Felix Mart of Hyrcania, and the other the history of the great Captain Gonzalo Hernandez de Cordova, with the life of Diego Garcia de Paredes. When the curate read the first 2 titles, he looked over at the barber and said,
We want my friend's housekeeper and niece here now."
"Nay," said the barber, "I can do just as well to carry them to the yard or to the hearth, and there is a very good fire there."
"What?
"Your worship would burn my books," said the landlord.
Only these 2, said the curate, Don Cirongilio and Felix Mart."
"Are my books, then, heretics or phlegmatics that you want to burn them?" said the landlord.
"Schismatics, you mean, friend," said the barber.
said the barber, "not phlegmatics." "That's it," said the landlord. "But if you want to burn any, let it be about the great captain and that Diego Garcia. For I would rather have a child of mine burnt than either of the others."
"Brother," said the curate, "those 2 books are made up of lies, and are full of folly and nonsense. But this of the great captain is a true history, and contains the deeds of Gonzalo Hernandez of Cordova, who by his many and great achievements earned the title all over the world of the great captain, a famous and illustrious name, and deserved by him alone. And this Diego Garcia de Paredes was a distinguished knight of the city of Trujillo in Extremadura, a most gallant soldier, and of such bodily strength that with one finger he stopped a mill wheel in full motion, and posted with a 2-handed sword at the foot of a bridge he kept the whole of an immense array from passing over it, and achieved such other exploits that, if, instead of his relating them himself with the modesty of a knight, and of one writing his own history, some free and unbiased writer had recorded them, they would have thrown into the shade all the deeds of the Hectors, Achilleses, and Rolands."
All right, just a quick aside here for a moment. Thank you very much to Bayun the Cat, who just followed us. We just hit our first 10 follower goal with that, so thank you very much and welcome. I think I've got a... Yep, we do. Huzzah! We hit our 10. Thank you very much. I hope you enjoy the book, the book and the reading. And now let's continue.
Tell that to my father, said the landlord. There's a thing to be astonished at. Stopping a mill wheel! By God, your worship should read what I have read of Felix Mark of Hircania. Now, how with one single backstroke he cleft 5 giants asunder through the middle as if they had been made of bean pods, like the little friars the children make. And another time he attacked a very great and powerful army, in which there were more than 1,600,000 soldiers, all armed from head to foot, and he routed them all as if they had been flocks of sheep.
Lots of pictures in this chapter.
And then, what do you say to the good Cirongilio of Thrace, that was so stout and bold, as may be seen in the book, where it is he related that as he was sailing along a river, there came up out of the midst of the water against him a fiery serpent, and he, as soon as he saw it, flung himself upon it, and got astride of its scaly shoulders, and squeezed its throat with both hands with such force that the serpent, finding he was throttling it, had nothing for it but to let himself sink to the bottom of the river, carrying with it the knight who would not let go his hold. And when they got down there, he found himself among the palaces, and gardens so pretty that it was a wonder to see. And then the serpent changed itself into an old ancient man, who told him such things as were never heard. Hold your peace, Signor, for if you were to hear this, you would go mad with delight. A couple of figs for your great captain and your Diego Garcia.
Hey, thanks, I appreciate that. I try and give some life to the characters and in my own little way, so I'm happy to hear that you like it. Hearing this, Dorothea said in a whisper to Cardenio, "Our landlord, it's almost fit to play a second part to Don Quixote." "I think so," said Cardenio, "for, as he shows, he accepts it as a certainty that everything those books relate took place exactly as it is written down. And the barefooted friars themselves would not persuade him to the contrary."
"But consider, brother," said the curate once more, "there never was any Felix Mart of Hircania in the world, nor any Cirongilio of Thrace, or any of the other knights of the same name that the books of chivalry talk of. The whole thing is the fabrication and invention of idle wits, devised by them for the purpose you describe of beguiling the time, as your reapers do when they read. For I swear to you, in all seriousness, there never were any such knights in the world, and no such exploits or nonsense ever happened anywhere."
"Try that bone on another dog," said the landlord. "As if I did not know how many make 5, and where my shoe pinches me, don't think to feed me with pap, for by God I am no fool. It is a good joke for your worship to try and persuade me that everything these good books say is nonsense and lies, and they're printed by the license of the lords of the Royal Council, as if they were people who would allow such a lot of lies to be printed altogether, and so many battles and enchantments that they take away one's senses."
"I have told you, friend," said the curate, "that this is done to divert our idle thoughts, and, as in well-ordered states, games of chess, fives, and billiards are allowed for the diversion of those who do not care, or are not obliged, or are unable to work. So, books of this kind are allowed to be printed, on the supposition that, what indeed is the truth, there can be nobody so ignorant as to take any of them for true stories. And if it were permitted me now, and the present company desired it, I could say something about the qualities books of chivalry should possess to be good ones. That would be to the advantage, and even to the taste of some. But I hope the time will come when I can communicate my ideas to someone who may be able to mend matters. And, in the meantime, Signor Landlord, believe what I have said, and take your books, and make up your mind about their truth or falsehood, and much good may they do you, and God grant you may not fall lame of the same foot your guest Don Quixote holds on."
"No fear of that," returned the landlord. "I shall not be so mad as to make a knight-errant of myself, for I see well enough that things are not now as they used to be in those days, when they say those famous knights roamed about the world."
Sancho had made his appearance in the middle of this conversation, and he was very much troubled and cast down by what he heard said about knights errant being now no longer in vogue, and all books of chivalry being folly and lies, and he resolved in his heart to wait and see what came of this journey of his master's, and if it did not turn out as happily as his master expected, he determined to leave him and go back to his wife and children and his ordinary labor. The landlord was carrying away the valise and the books, but the curate said to him,
Wait. I want to see what those papers are that are written in such a good hand.
The landlord, taking them out, handed them to him to read. He perceived they were work of about 8 sheets of manuscript, with, in large letters at the beginning, the title of Novel of the Ill-Advised Curiosity. The curate read 3 or 4 lines to himself, and said,
I must say, the title of this novel does not seem to be a bad one, and I feel an inclination to read it all.
To which the landlord replied,
Then your reverence will do well to read it. For I can tell you that some guests who have read it here have been much pleased with it, and have begged it of me very earnestly, but I would not give it, meaning to return it to the person who forgot the valise, books, and papers here. For maybe he will return here sometime, or other, and though I know I shall miss the books, faith I mean to return them, for though I am an innkeeper, still I am a Christian.
You are very right, friend, said the curate, but for all that, if the novel pleases me, you must let me copy it.
With all my heart,
replied the host. While they were talking, Cardenio had taken up the novel and begun to read it, and forming the same opinion of it as the curate, he begged him to read it, so that they might all hear it.
I would read it, said the curate, if the time would not be better spent in sleeping.
It will be rest enough for me, said Dorothea, to while away the time by listening to some tale, for my spirits are not yet tranquil enough to let me sleep when it would be seasonable.
Well then, in that case, said the curate, I will read it. If it were only out of curiosity, perhaps it may contain something pleasant.
Master Nicholas added his entreaties to the same effect, and Sancho too, seeing which, and considering that he would give pleasure to all, and receive it himself. The curate said,
Well then, attend to me, everyone, for the novel begins thus.
All right, that brings us to the end of chapter 32. And actually, this next chapter is actually the story that was being discussed a little bit in chat last time as we were reading, trying to identify where in the story we were, the gentleman of the ill-advised curiosity. So, it is a little bit of foreshadowing there. And this is a very long chapter here coming up. So this is, in all likelihood, going to be the last chapter that we read tonight. So, buckle in. Chapter 33, in which is related the novel of the ill-advised curiosity. In Florence, a rich and famous city of Italy, in the province called Tuscany, there lived 2 gentlemen of wealth and quality, Anselmo and Lothario, such great friends that, by way of distinction, they were called by all that knew them the 2 friends. They were unmarried, young, of the same age and of the same tastes, which was enough to account for the reciprocal friendship between them. Anselmo, it is true, was somewhat more inclined to seek pleasure in love than Lothario, for whom the pleasures of the chase had more attraction. But on an occasion, Anselmo would forego his own tastes to yield to those of Lothario, and Lothario would surrender his to fall in with those of Anselmo, and in this way their inclinations kept pace one with the other, with a concord so perfect that the best regulated clock could not surpass it. Anselmo was deep in love, the high-born and beautiful maiden of the same city, the daughter of parents so estimable, and so estimable herself, that he resolved, with the approval of his friend Lothario, without whom he did nothing, to ask her of them in marriage, and did so. Lothario, being the bearer of the demand, and conducting the negotiations so much to the satisfaction of his friend that in short time he was in possession of the object of his desires. And Camilla, so happy in having won Anselmo for her husband, that she gave thanks unceasingly to heaven and to Lothario, by whose means such good fortune had fallen to her. The first few days, those of a wedding being usually days of merrymaking, Lothario frequented his friend Anselmo's house, as he had been wont, striving to do honor to him and to the occasion, and to gratify him in every way he could. But when the wedding days were over, and the succession of visits and congratulations had slackened, he began purposely to leave off going to the house of Anselmo, for it seemed to him, as it naturally would to all men of sense, that friends' houses ought not to be visited after marriage with the same frequency as in their master's bachelor days, because, though true and genuine friendship cannot and should not be in any way suspicious, still, a married man's honor is a thing of such delicacy that it is held liable to injury from brothers, much more than from friends. Anselmo remarked the cessation of Lothario's visits, and complained of it to him, saying that if he had known that marriage was to keep him from enjoying his society as he used, he would never have married, and that if by the thorough harmony that subsisted between them while he was a bachelor they had earned such a sweet name as that of the two friends, he should not allow a title so rare and so delightful to be lost through a needless anxiety to act circumspectly. And so he entreated him, if such a phrase was allowable between them, to be once more master of his house, and to come in and go out as formerly, assuring him that his wife Camilla had no other desire or inclination than that which he would wish her to have, and that knowing how sincerely they loved one another, she was grieved to see such coldness in him. To all this, and much more, that Anselmo said to Lothario to persuade him to come to his house, as he had been in the habit of doing, Lothario replied with so much prudence, sense, and judgment, that Anselmo was satisfied of his friend's good intentions. And it was agreed that on 2 days in the week, and on holidays, Lothario should come to dine with him. As though this arrangement was made between them, Lothario resolved to observe it no further than he considered to be in accordance with the honor of his friend. Whose good name was more to him than his own. He said, and justly, that a married man upon whom heaven had bestowed a beautiful wife should consider as carefully what friends he brought to his house, as what female friends his wife associated with. For what cannot be done or arranged in the marketplace, in church, at public festivals, or at stations, opportunities that husbands cannot always deny their wives, may be easily managed in the house of the female friend, or relative, in whom most confidence is reposed. Lothario said, too, that every married man should have some friend who would point out to him any negligence he might be guilty of in his conduct. For it will sometimes happen that owing to the deep affection the husband bears his wife, either he does not caution her, or, not to vex her, refrains from telling her to do or not to do certain things, doing or avoiding which may be a matter of honor or reproach to him, and errors of this kind he could easily correct if warned by a friend. But where is such a friend to be found as Lothario would have, so judicious, so loyal, and so true? Of a truth I know not. Lothario alone was such a one, for with the utmost care and vigilance he watched over the honor of his friend, and strove to diminish, cut down, and reduce the number of days for going to his house according to their agreement, lest the visits of a young man, wealthy, high-born, and with the attractions he was conscious of possessing, at the house of a woman so beautiful as Camilla, should be regarded with suspicion by the inquisitive and malicious eyes of the idle public. For though his integrity and reputation might bridle slanderous tongues, still he was unwilling to hazard either his own good name or that of his friend. And, for this reason, most of the days agreed upon he devoted to some other business, which he pretended was unavoidable, so that a great portion of the day was taken up with complaints on one side and excuses on the other. It happened, however, that on one occasion, when the two were strolling together outside the city, Anselmo addressed the following words to Lothario. "Thou mayest suppose, Lothario, my friend, that I am unable to give sufficient thanks for the favors God has rendered me in making me the son of such parents as mine were, and bestowing upon me with no niggard hand what are called the gifts of nature, as well as those of fortune, and above all, for what he has done in giving me thee for a friend, and Camilla for a wife, two treasures that I value, if not as highly as I ought, at least as highly as I am able. And yet, with all these good things, which are commonly all that men need to enable them to live happily, I am the most discontented and dissatisfied man in the whole world. For I know not how long since I have been harassed and oppressed by a desire so strange and so unnatural that I wonder at myself and blame and chide myself when I am alone, and strive to stifle it and hide it from my own thoughts, and with no better success than if I were endeavoring deliberately to publish it to all the world, and as, in short, it must come out, I would confide it to thy safekeeping, feeling sure that by this means, and by thy readiness as a true friend to afford me relief, I shall soon find myself freed from the distress it causes me, and that thy care will give me happiness in the same degree as my own folly has caused me misery." The words of Anselmo struck Lothario with astonishment, unable as he was to conjecture the purport of such a lengthy preamble, and though he strove to imagine what desire it could be that so troubled his friend, his conjectures were all far from the truth, and to relieve the anxiety which this perplexity was causing him, he told him he was doing a flagrant injustice to their great friendship in seeking circuitous methods of confiding to him his most hidden thoughts, for he well knew he might reckon upon his counsel in diverting them, or his help in carrying them into effect. "That is the truth," replied Anselmo, "and relying upon that, I will tell thee, friend Lothario, that the desire which harasses me is that of knowing whether my wife Camilla is as good and as perfect as I think her to be. And I cannot satisfy myself of the truth on this point except by testing her in such a way that the trial may prove the purity of her virtue as the fire proves that of gold. Because I am persuaded, my friend, that a woman is virtuous only in proportion as she is or is not tempted, and that she alone is strong who does not yield to the promises, gifts, tears, and importunities of earnest lovers. For what thanks does a woman deserve for being good if no one urges her to be bad? And what wonder is it that she is reserved and circumspect, to whom no opportunity is given of going wrong, and who knows she has a husband that will take her life the first time he detects her in impropriety? I do not, therefore, hold her who is virtuous through fear or want of opportunity in the same estimation as her who comes out of temptation and trial with a crown of victory. And so, for these reasons, and many others that I could give thee to justify and support the opinion I hold, I am desirous that my wife Camilla should pass this crisis, and be refined and tested by the fire of finding herself wooed, and by one worthy to set his affections upon her. And if she comes out, as I know she will, victorious from this struggle, I shall look upon my good fortune as unequalled. I shall be able to say that the cup of my desire is full, and that the virtuous woman of whom the sage says, "Who shall find her?" has fallen to my lot. And if the result be the contrary of what I expect, in the satisfaction of knowing that I have been right in my opinion, I shall bear without complaint the pain which my so dearly bought experience will naturally cause me. And as nothing of all thou wilt urge in opposition to my wish will avail to keep me from carrying it into effect, it is my desire, friend Lothario, that thou shouldst consent to become the instrument for effecting this purpose that I am bent upon. For I will afford the opportunities to that end, and nothing shall be wanting that I may think necessary for the pursuit of a virtuous, honourable, modest, and high-minded woman. And among other reasons, I am induced to entrust this arduous task to thee, by the consideration that if Camilla be conquered by thee, the conquest will not be pushed to the extremes, but only far enough to account that accomplished, which from a sense of honour will be left undone. Thus I shall not be wronged in anything more than intention, and my wrong will remain buried in the integrity of thy silence, which I know well will be as lasting as that of death in what concerns me. If, therefore, thou wouldst have me enjoy what can be called life, thou wilt at once engage in this love struggle, not lukewarmly nor slothfully, but with the energy and zeal that my desire demands, and with the loyalty our friendship assures me of. Such were the words Anselmo addressed to Lothario, who listened to them with such attention that, except to say what has already been mentioned, he did not open his lips until the other had finished. Then, perceiving that he had no more to say, after regarding him for a while as one would regard something never before seen that excited wonder and amazement, he said to him, I cannot persuade myself, Anselmo, my friend, that what thou hast said to me is not in jest. If I thought that thou wert speaking seriously, I would not have allowed thee to go so far, so as to put a stop to thy long harangue by not listening to thee. I verily suspect that either thou dost not know me, or I do not know thee, but no, I know well thou art Anselmo, and thou knowest that I am Lothario. The misfortune is, it seems to me, that thou art not the Anselmo thou wert, and must have thought that I am not the Lothario I should be. For the things that thou hast said to me are not those of that Anselmo who was my friend, nor are those that thou demandest of me what should be asked of the Lothario thou knowest. True friends will prove their friends, and make use of them, as a poet said, usque adoras, whereby he meant that they will not make use of their friendship in things that are contrary to God's will. If this, then, was a heathen's feeling about friendship, how much more should it be a Christian's, who knows that the divine must not be forfeited for the sake of any human friendship? And if a friend should go so far as to put aside his duty to heaven to fulfill his duty to his friend, it should not be in matters that are trifling, or of little moment, but in such as affect the man's life and honour. Now tell me, Anselmo, in which of these two art thou imperilled, that I should hazard myself to gratify thee, and do a thing so detestable as that thou seekest of me? Neither, forsooth, on the contrary, thou dost ask of me, so far as I understand, to strive and labour to rob thee of honour and life, and to rob myself of them at the same time. For if I take away thy honour, it is plain I take away thy life, as a man without honour is worse than dead. And being the instrument, as thou wilt have it so, of so much wrong to thee, shall not I, too, be left without honour, and consequently without life? Listen to me, Anselmo, my friend, and be not impatient to answer me until I have said what occurs to me touching the object of thy desire, for there will be time enough left for thee to reply, and for me to hear. Be it so, said Anselmo. Say what thou wilt. Lothario went on to say, It seems to me, Anselmo, that thine is just now the temper of mind which is always that of the Moors, who can never be brought to see the error of their creed by quotations from the Holy Scriptures, or by reasons which depend upon the examination of the understanding, or are founded upon the articles of faith, but must have examples that are palpable, easy, intelligible, capable of proof, not admitting of doubt, with mathematical demonstrations that cannot be denied. Like, if equals be taken from equals, the remainders are equal. And if they do not understand this in words, and indeed they do not, it has to be shown to them with their hands, and put before their eyes, and even with all this, no one succeeds in convincing them of the truth of our holy religion. This same mode of proceeding I shall have to adopt with thee, for the desire which has sprung up in thee is so absurd and remote from everything that has a semblance of reason that I feel it would be a waste of time to employ it in reasoning with thy simplicity. For, at present, I will call it by no other name, and I am even tempted to leave thee in thy folly as a punishment for thy pernicious desire, but the friendship I bear thee, which will not allow me to desert thee in such manifest danger of destruction, keeps me from dealing so harshly by thee. and that thou mayest clearly see this, say, Anselmo, hast thou not told me that I must force my suit upon a modest woman, decoy one that is virtuous, make overtures to one that is pure-minded, pay court to one that is prudent? Yes, thou hast told me so. Then, if thou knowest that thou hast a wife, modest, virtuous, pure-minded, and prudent, what is it that thou seekest? And if thou believest that she will come forth victorious from all my attacks, as doubtless she would, what higher titles than those she possesses now dost thou think thou canst bestow upon her then? Or in what will she be better than she is now? Either thou dost not hold her to be what thou sayest, or thou knowest not what thou dost demand. If thou dost not hold her to be what thou sayest, why dost thou seek to prove her instead of treating her as guilty in the way that may seem best to thee? But if she be as virtuous as thou believest, it is an uncalled-for proceeding to make trial of truth itself, for, after trial, it will be in the same estimation as before. Thus, then, it is conclusive that to attempt things from which harm rather than advantage may come to us is the part of unreasoning and reckless minds, more especially when they are things which we are not forced or compelled to attempt, and which show from afar that it is plainly madness to attempt them.
Lothario makes a very good point. Don't go testing your spouse or significant other for no better reason than just to say, hey, let's have a test. That's not cool. So, I'm rather certain that Anselmo will not listen to his friend. But, let's see. Difficulties are attempted either for the sake of God, or for the sake of the world, or for both. Those undertaken for God's sake are those which the saints undertake when they attempt to live the lives of angels in human bodies. Those undertaken for the sake of the world are those of the men who traverse such a vast expanse of water, such a variety of climates, so many strange countries, to acquire what are called the blessings of fortune. And those undertaken for the sake of God and the world together are those of brave soldiers, who no sooner do they see in the enemy's wall a breach as wide as a cannonball could make, than, casting aside all fear without hesitating or heeding the manifest peril that it threatens them, borne onward by the desire of defending their faith, their country, and their king, they fling themselves dauntlessly into the midst of the 1,000 opposing deaths that await them. Such are the things that men are wont to attempt, and there is honor, glory, gain in attempting them, however full of difficulty and peril they may be. But that which thou sayest, it is thy wish to attempt and carry out, will not win thee the glory of God, nor the blessings of fortune, nor fame among men. For even if the issue be as thou wouldst have it, thou wilt be no happier, richer, or more honored than thou art this moment. And if it be otherwise, thou wilt be reduced to misery greater than can be imagined. For then it will avail thee nothing to reflect that no one is aware of the misfortune that has befallen thee. It will suffice to torture and crush thee, that thou knowest it thyself. And, in confirmation of the truth of what I say, let me repeat to thee a stanza made by the famous poet Luigi Tansilio at the end of the first part of the Tears of St. Peter, which says thus. Eventually this cough will go away. The anguish and the shame but greater grew in Peter's heart as morning slowly came. No eye was there to see him, well he knew, yet he himself was to himself a shame. Exposed to all men's gaze or screened from view, a noble heart will feel the pang the same. A prey to shame the sinning soul will be, though none but heaven and earth its shame can see. Thus, by keeping it secret, thou wilt not escape thy sorrow, but rather thou wilt shed tears unceasingly, if not tears of the eyes, tears of blood from the heart, like those shed by that simple doctor our poet tells us of, that tried the test of the cup, which the wise Rinaldo, better advised, refused to do. For though this may be a poetic fiction, it contains a moral lesson worthy of attention, and study, and imitation. Moreover, by what I am about to say to thee, thou wilt be led to see the great error thou wouldst commit. Tell me, Anselmo, if heaven or good fortune had made thee master and lawful owner of a diamond of the finest quality, with the excellence and purity of which all the lapidaries that had seen it had been satisfied, saying with one voice and common consent that in purity, quality, and fineness it was all that a stone of the kind could possibly be, thou thyself, too, being of the same belief, as knowing nothing to the contrary, would it be reasonable in thee to desire to take that diamond and place it between an anvil and a hammer, and by mere force of blows and strength of arm to try it, if it were as hard and fine as they said? And if thou didst, and if the stone should resist so silly a test, that would add nothing to its value or reputation, and if it were broken, as it might be, would not all be lost? Undoubtedly it would, leaving its owner to be rated as a fool in the opinion of all. Consider then, Anselmo, my friend, that Camilla is a diamond of the finest quality, as well in thy estimation as in that of others, and that it is contrary to reason to expose her to the risk of being broken, for if she remains intact, she cannot rise to a higher value than she now possesses. And if she give way and be unable to resist, bethink thee now how thou wilt be deprived of her, and with what good reason thou wilt complain of thyself for having been the cause of her ruin and thine own. Remember, there is no jewel in the world so precious as a chaste and virtuous woman, and that the whole honor of women consists in reputation. And since thy wife's is of that high excellence that thou knowest, wherefore shouldst thou seek to call that truth in question? Remember, my friend, that woman is an imperfect animal, and that impediments are not to be placed in her way to make her trip and fall, but that they should be removed, and her path left clear of all obstacles, so that without hindrance she may run her course freely to attain the desired perfection, which consists in being virtuous. Naturalists tell us that the ermine is a little animal which has a fur of purest white, and that when the hunters wish to take it, they make use of this artifice. Having ascertained the places which it frequents and passes, they stop the way to them with mud, and then rousing it, drive it towards the spot, and as soon as the ermine comes to the mud, it halts, and allows itself to be taken captive, rather than pass through the mire, and spoil and sully its whiteness, which it values more than life and liberty. The virtuous and chaste woman is an ermine, and whiter and purer than snow is the virtue of modesty. And he who wishes her not to lose it, but to keep and preserve it, must adopt a course different from that employed with the ermine. He must not put before her the mire of the gifts and attentions of persevering lovers, because, perhaps, and even without a perhaps, she may not have sufficient virtue and natural strength in herself to pass through and tread underfoot these impediments. They must be removed, and the brightness of virtue and the beauty of a fair fame must be put before her. A virtuous woman, too, is like a mirror of clear shining crystal, liable to be tarnished and dimmed by every breath that touches it. She must be treated as relics are, adored, not touched. She must be protected and prized, as one protects and prizes a fair garden full of roses and flowers, the owner of which allows no one to trespass or pluck a blossom, enough for others, that from afar and through the iron grating they may enjoy its fragrance and its beauty. Finally, let me repeat to thee some verses that come to my mind. I heard them in a modern comedy, and it seems to me they bear upon the point we are discussing. A prudent old man was giving advice to another, the father of a young girl, to lock her up, watch over her, and keep her in seclusion, and among other arguments he used these: Woman is a thing of glass, but her brittleness 'tis best not too curiously to test. Who knows what may come to pass? Breaking is an easy matter, and it's folly to expose what you cannot mend to blows, what you can't make whole to shatter. This, then, all may hold as true, and the reason's plain to see. For if Danaus there be, there are golden showers too. All that I have said to thee so far, Anselmo, has had reference to what concerns thee. Now, it is right
that I should say something what regards myself. And if I be prolix, pardon me for the labyrinth into which thou hast entered, and from which thou wouldst have me extricate thee makes it necessary. Thou dost reckon me thy friend, and thou wouldst rob me of honour, a thing wholly inconsistent with friendship. And not only dost thou aim at this, but thou wouldst have me rob thee of it also. That thou wouldst rob me of it is clear, for when Camilla sees that I pay court to her as thou requirest, she will certainly regard me as a man without honour or right feeling, since I attempt to do a thing so much opposed to what I owe to my own position and thy friendship. That thou wouldst have me rob thee of it is beyond a doubt. For Camilla, seeing that I press my suit upon her, will suppose that I have perceived in her something light that has encouraged me to make known to her my base desire. And if she holds herself dishonoured, her dishonour touches thee as belonging to her. And hence arises what so commonly takes place, that the husband of the adulterous woman, though he may not be aware of her, or have given any cause for his wife's failure in her duty, or, being careless or negligent, have had it in his power to prevent his dishonour, nevertheless is stigmatized by a vile and reproachful name, and in a manner regarded with eyes of contempt instead of pity by all who know of his wife's guilt, though they see that he is unfortunate not by his own fault, but by the lust of a vicious consort. But I will tell thee why with good reason dishonour attaches to the husband of the unchaste wife, though he know not that she is so, nor be to blame, nor have done anything, or given any provocation to make her so, and be not weary with listening me, for it will be for thy good. When God created our first parent in the earthly paradise, the Holy Scripture says that he infused sleep into Adam, and while he slept, took a rib from his left side, of which he formed our mother Eve. And when Adam awoke and beheld her, he said, This is flesh of my flesh, and bone of my bone. And God said, For this shall a man leave his father and his mother, and they shall be two in one flesh. And then was instituted the divine sacrament of marriage, with such ties that death alone can loose them. And such is the force and virtue of this miraculous sacrament, that it makes two different persons one, and the same flesh. And even more than this, when the virtuous are married, for though they have two souls, they have but one will, and hence it follows that as the flesh of the wife is one and the same with that of her husband, the stains that may come upon it, or the injuries it incurs, fall upon the husband's flesh, though he, as has been said, may have given no cause for them. Whereas the pain of the foot or any member of the body is felt by the whole body, because all is one flesh, as the head feels the hurt to the ankle without having caused it, so the husband, being one with her, shares the dishonour of the wife. And as all worldly honour or dishonour comes from flesh and blood, and the erring wife's is of that kind, the husband must needs bear his part of it, and be held dishonoured, without knowing it. See then, Anselmo, the peril thou art encountering in seeking to disturb the peace of thy virtuous consort. See, for what an empty and ill-advised curiosity thou wouldst rouse up passions that now repose in quiet in the breast of thy chaste wife. Reflect that what thou art staking all to win is little, and what thou wilt lose so much that I leave it undescribed, not having the words to express it. But if all I have said be not enough to turn thee from thy vile purpose, thou must seek some other instrument for thy dishonour and misfortune, for such I will not consent to be, though I lose thy friendship, the greatest loss that I can conceive. Having said this, the wise and virtuous Lothario was silent, and Anselmo, troubled in mind and deep in thought, was unable, for a while, to utter a word in reply. But at length he said, I have listened, Lothario, my friend, attentively, as thou hast seen, to what thou hast chosen to say to me. And in thy arguments, examples, and comparisons, I have seen that high intelligence thou dost possess, and the perfection of true friendship thou hast reached. And likewise I see and confess that, if I am not guided by thy opinion, but follow my own. I am flying from the good and pursuing the evil. This being so, thou must remember that I am now laboring under that infirmity which women sometimes suffer from, when the craving seizes them to eat clay, plaster, charcoal, and things even worse, disgusting to look at. Much more to eat. So that it will be necessary to have recourse to some artifice to cure me, and this can be easily effected, if only thou wilt make a beginning, even though it be in a lukewarm and make-believe fashion, to pay court to Camilla, who will not be so yielding that her virtue will give way at the first attack. With this mere attempt, I shall rest satisfied, and thou wilt have done what our friendship binds thee to do, not only in giving me life, but in persuading me not to discard my honor. And this thou art bound to do, for one reason alone, that being, as I am resolved to apply this test, it is not for thee to permit me to reveal my weakness to another, and so imperil that honor thou art striving to keep me from losing. If thine may not stand as high as it ought in the estimation of Camilla, while thou art paying court to her, that is of little or no importance, because ere long, on finding in her that constancy which we expect, thou canst tell her the plain truth as regards our stratagem, and so regain thy place in her esteem. And as thou art venturing so little, and by the venture canst afford me so much satisfaction, refuse not to undertake it, even if further difficulties present themselves to thee. For as I have said, if thou wilt only make a beginning, I will acknowledge the issue decided. These friends, the one being actually a really good bro, and the other needing a bit of a come to Jesus moment. I guess it's opposites attract or something, I guess. Lothario, seeing the fixed determination of Anselmo, and not knowing what further examples to offer or arguments to urge in order to dissuade him from it, and perceiving that he threatened to confide his pernicious scheme to someone else to avoid a greater evil, resolved to gratify him and do what he asked, intending to manage the business so as to satisfy Anselmo without corrupting the mind of Camilla. So in reply, he told him not to communicate his purpose to any other, for he would undertake the task himself, and would begin it as soon as he pleased. Anselmo embraced him warmly and affectionately, and thanked him for his offer, as if he had bestowed some great favor upon him, and it was agreed between them to set about it the next day, Anselmo affording opportunity and time to Lothario to converse alone with Camilla, and furnishing him with money and jewels to offer and present to her. He suggested, too, that he should treat her to music, and write verses in her praise, and if he was unwilling to take the trouble of composing them, he offered to do it himself. Lothario agreed to all with an intention very different from what Anselmo supposed. And with this understanding, they returned to Anselmo's house, where they found Camilla, awaiting her husband anxiously and uneasily, for he was later than usual in returning that day. Lothario repaired to his own house, and Anselmo remained in his, as well satisfied as Lothario was troubled in mind, for he could see no satisfactory way out of this ill-advised business. That night, however, he thought of a plan by which he might deceive Anselmo without any injury to Camilla. The next day, he went to dine with his friend, and was welcomed by Camilla, who received and treated him with great cordiality, knowing the affection her husband felt for him. When dinner was over and the cloth removed, Anselmo told Lothario to stay there with Camilla while he attended to some pressing business, as he would return in an hour and a half. Camilla begged him not to go, and Lothario offered to accompany him, but nothing could persuade Anselmo, who, on the contrary, pressed Lothario to remain waiting for him, as he had a matter of great importance to discuss with him. At the same time, he bade Camilla not to leave Lothario alone until he came back. In short, he contrived to put so good a face on the reason, or the folly, of his absence, that no one could have suspected it was a pretense. Anselmo took his departure, and Camilla and Lothario were left alone at the table, for the rest of the household had gone to dinner. Lothario saw himself in the lists according to his friend's wish, and facing an enemy that could, by her beauty alone, vanquish a squadron of armed knights, judge whether he had good reason to fear. But what he did was to lean his elbow on the arm of the chair, and his cheek upon his hand, and, asking Camilla's pardon for his ill manners, he said he wished to take a little sleep until Anselmo returned. Camilla, in reply, said he could repose more at his ease in the reception room than in his chair, and begged of him to go in and sleep there. But Lothario declined, and there he remained asleep, until the return of Anselmo, who, finding Camilla in her own room and Lothario asleep, imagined that he had stayed away so long as to afford them time enough for conversation, and even for sleep, and was all impatience until Lothario should wake up, that he might go out with him and question him to his success. Everything fell out as he wished. Lothario awoke, and the two at once left the house, and Anselmo asked what he was anxious to know. And Lothario, in answer, told him that he had not thought it advisable to declare himself entirely the first time, and therefore had only extolled the charms of Camilla, telling her that all the city spoke of nothing else but her beauty and wit, for this seemed to him an excellent way of beginning to gain her goodwill, and render her disposed to listen to him with pleasure the next time, thus availing himself of the device the devil has recourse to when he would deceive one who is on the watch. For he, being the angel of darkness, transforms himself into an angel of light, and, under cover of a fair seeming, discloses himself at length, and effects his purpose, if at the beginning his wiles are not discovered. All this gave great satisfaction to Anselmo, and he said he would afford the same opportunity every day, but without leaving the house, for he would find things to do at home so that Camilla should not detect the plot. Thus, then, several days went by, and Lothario, without uttering a word to Camilla, reported to Anselmo that he had talked with her, and that he had never been able to draw from her the slightest indication of consent to anything dishonorable, nor even a sign or shadow of hope. On the contrary, he said she would inform her husband of it. "So far, very well," said Anselmo. "Camilla has thus far resisted words. We must now see how she will resist deeds. I will give you tomorrow 2,000 crowns in gold for you to offer or even present, and as many more to buy jewels and to lure her, for women are fond of being becomingly attired and going gaily dressed, and all the more so if they are beautiful, however chaste they may be. And if she resists this temptation, I will rest satisfied, and will give you no more trouble." He said, just start it and then we'll be done, but no, now, give an inch, take a mile. Here we go. As you said, I'm sure this is going to end well. Lothario replied that now he had begun, he would carry on the undertaking to the end, though he perceived he was to come out of it wearied and vanquished. The next day he received the 4,000 crowns, and with them 4,000 perplexities, for he knew not what to say by way of a new falsehood. But in the end he made up his mind to tell him that Camilla stood as firm against gifts and promises as against words, and that there was no use in taking any further trouble, for the time was all spent to no purpose. But chance, directing things in a different manner, so ordered it that Anselmo, having left Lothario and Camilla alone as on other occasions, shut himself into a chamber, and posted himself to watch and listen through the keyhole to what passed between them, and perceived that for more than half an hour Lothario did not utter a word to Camilla, nor would utter a word though he were to be there for an age. And he came to the conclusion that what his friend had told him about the replies of Camilla was all invention and falsehood. And to ascertain if it were so, he came out, and calling Lothario aside, asked him what news he had, and in what humor Camilla was. Lothario replied that he was not disposed to go on with the business, for she had answered him so angrily and harshly that he had no heart to say anything more to her. "Ah, Lothario, Lothario," said Anselmo, "how ill dost thou meet thy obligations to me, and the great confidence I repose in thee! I have been just now watching through this keyhole, and I have seen that thou hast not said a word to Camilla, whence I conclude that on the former occasions thou hast not spoken to her either. And if this be so, as no doubt it is, why dost thou deceive me? Or wherefore seekest thou by craft to deprive me of the means I might find of attaining my desire?" Anselmo said no more, but he had said enough to cover Lothario with shame and confusion, and he, feeling as if his honor were touched by having been detected in a lie, swore to Anselmo that he would from that moment devote himself to satisfying him without any deception, as he would see if he had the curiosity to watch, though he need not take the trouble. The pains he would take to satisfy him would remove all suspicions from his mind. Anselmo believed him, and to afford him an opportunity more free and less liable to surprise, he resolved to absent himself from his house for 8 days, betaking himself to that of a friend of his who lived in a village not far from the city. And the better to account for his departure to Camilla, he so arranged it that the friend should send him a very pressing invitation. Unhappy, short-sighted Anselmo, what art thou doing? What art thou plotting? What art thou devising? Bethink thee thou art working against thyself, plotting thine own dishonor, devising thine own ruin. Thy wife Camilla is virtuous. Thou dost possess her in peace and quietness. No one assails thy happiness. Her thoughts wander not beyond the walls of thy house. Thou art her heaven on earth, the object of her wishes, the fulfillment of her desires, the measure wherewith she measures her will, making it conform in all things to thine and heaven's. If then the mine of her honor, beauty, virtue, and modesty yields thee without labor all the wealth it contains, and thou canst wish for, why wilt thou dig the earth in search of fresh veins, of new, unknown treasure, risking the collapse of all, since it but rests on the feeble props of her weak nature? Bethink thee that from him who seeks impossibilities, that which is possible may with justice be withheld, as was better expressed by a poet who said, "'Tis mine to seek for life in death, health in disease seek I seek in prison freedom's breath, in traitors loyalty." So fate, that ever scorns to grant, or grace or boon to me, since what can never be I want, denies me what might be. The next day, Anselmo took his departure for the village, leaving instructions with Camilla that during his absence Lothario would come to look after his house and to dine with her, and that she was to treat him as she would himself. Camilla was distressed, as a discreet and right-minded woman would be, at the orders her husband left her, and bade him remember that it was not becoming that anyone should occupy his seat at the table during his absence, and if he acted thus from not feeling confidence that she would be able to manage his house, let him try her this time, and he would find by experience that she was equal to greater responsibilities. Anselmo replied that it was his pleasure to have it so, and that she had only to submit and obey. Camilla said she would do so, though against her will. Anselmo went, and the next day Lothario came to his house, where he was received by Camilla with a friendly and modest welcome. But she never suffered Lothario to see her alone, for she was always attended by her men and women servants, especially by a handmaid of hers, Leonela by name, to whom she was much attached, for they had been brought up together from childhood in her father's house, and whom she had kept with her after her marriage with Anselmo. The first 3 days Lothario did not speak to her, though he might have done so when they removed the cloth and the servants retired to dine hastily, for such were Camilla's orders. Nay, more, Leonela had directions to dine earlier than Camilla, and never to leave her side. She, however, having her thoughts fixed upon other things, more to her taste, and wanting that time and opportunity for her own pleasures, did not always obey her mistress's commands, but on the contrary left them alone, as if they had ordered her to do so. But the modest bearing of Camilla, the calmness of her countenance, the composure of her aspect, were enough to bridle the tongue of Lothario. But the influence which the many virtues of Camilla exerted in imposing silence on Lothario's tongue proved mischievous for both of them. For if his tongue was silent, his thoughts were busy, and could dwell at leisure upon the perfections of Camilla's goodness and beauty one by one, charms enough to warm with love a marble statue, not to say a heart of flesh. Lothario gazed upon her when he might have been speaking to her, and thought how worthy of being loved she was. And thus reflection began, little by little, to assail his allegiance to Anselmo. And 1,000 times he thought of withdrawing from the city, and going where Anselmo should never see him, nor he see Camilla. But already the delight he found in gazing on her interposed and held him fast. He put a constraint upon himself, and struggled to repel and repress the pleasure he found in contemplating Camilla. When alone, he blamed himself for his weakness, called himself a bad friend, nay, a bad Christian. Then he argued the matter and compared himself with Anselmo, always coming to the conclusion that the folly and rashness of Anselmo had been worse than his faithlessness, and that if he could excuse his intentions as easily before God as with man, he had no reason to fear any punishment for his offense. In short, the beauty and goodness of Camilla, joined with the opportunity which the blind husband had placed in his hands, overthrew the loyalty of Lothario, and giving heed to nothing save the object towards which his inclinations led him, after Anselmo had been 3 days absent, during which he had been carrying on a continual struggle with his passion, he began to make love to Camilla with so much vehemence and warmth of language that she was overwhelmed with amazement, and could only rise from her place and retire to her room without answering him a word. But the hope, which always springs up with love, was not weakened in Lothario by this repelling demeanor. On the contrary, his passion for Camilla increased, and she, discovering in him what she had never expected, knew not what to do, and considering it neither safe nor right to give him the chance or opportunity of speaking to her again, she resolved to send, as she did that very night, one of her servants with a letter to Anselmo, in which she addressed the following words to him. Oh, okay, yeah, I guess that brings us to the end of this chapter. We have, the next chapter is going to be the continuation of this story, which I think is a little strange, because if you remember, when this was brought out, I want to say that it was only like 8 pages of written text that they'd seen. I don't think it was an entire book. We've already gone past the source material here. But, and a quick reminder that previously, that when Lothario started to make love to Camilla, is a very different sort of euphemism that than we may be used to. This is more that he just started to court her, to make motions and allusions, to start to try and woo her. Not such that in the modern turn of phrase of making love. I should hope, anyway. It is interesting how these sort of side stories keep cropping up in this, because there was this, obviously, and then the story of Castillo and Dorothea, where we're just absolutely taken for a side story, backtracking, going all across the countryside in a different tangent, and eventually we'll get back to the characters that we've been made familiar with. It is actually pretty charming. I like it. This little sort of almost a parable as it comes across. So, yeah, very interesting, very fun. And this is a very different style than we've seen in a lot of the books so far. Sort of seems like Cervantes flexing, being able to write different styles and different stories in the same book, and just like, haha, look what I can do, ha ha ha. So yeah, that's fun. Very fun. All right, guys, this is as far as we're going to go tonight. Let me make a bookmark here. And let's get back to the other reading the other section where we're not actively reading. Yeah, so this has been Don Quixote, and we will be having a bit of a break from Don Quixote tomorrow, because we are following a new schedule that is starting just this week, being a bit of a celebration of our 1 year's streaming, reading together, a year on YouTube. We're about a month in on... is it a month? No, it's not. It's only a couple weeks on Twitch. But anyway, a bit of a celebration of our 1 year's anniversary, a little belated. We're going to start reading modern books on Saturdays. We'll be starting a little bit sooner than normal. We'll be starting at 6 o'clock Eastern instead of 8. And the Saturday readings are going to be unarchived. It is a bit of a divergence from what we usually do, but it's a nice little change of pace, I think. Start to bring in some favorites of a little bit more familiar taste. And so, tomorrow, we're going to be starting with reading The Fellowship of the Ring. Because, you know what? If I'm going to be starting to read a more modern fiction, Tolkien is a wonderful place to start. I've got a list of my own favorites that we can go to, and more modern books that I haven't gotten to read yet, that could be fantastically fun. And I'm sure that you guys might have things that you'd like to see me read that are a little bit more current. And I am certainly open to suggestions after this first one. So we'll be reading from 6 to 10 tomorrow. We'll have the same endpoint. We'll just start sooner. And we'll see how far along we get. And this is going to be a regular thing on Saturdays from now on. Just to give a little bit of a different vibe. I know Twitch likes the 4-hour stream windows anyway, so it'll be good. Be good for everybody involved. All right. Oh, yeah, also, unless I forget, we have a surprise tomorrow. Something that has been cooking for a very long time, and I'm going to be very happy to reveal. It goes along with our celebration of a year's time. So, look forward to that. We've got, between the surprise tomorrow and the new format for Saturdays, I am excited. I hope you are too. Alright, that is enough for me tonight. Let's see whether or not we're going to be able to get Raid to work, because we've tried a few times. So far, usually we don't have enough people around to get a successful raid going, and the last few times we've raided have been a little importune. So, let's see if we've got somebody in the same category that maybe is actually reading this time. And just go from there. Let's see. Let's see. Oh, this guy is reading from The Witcher. That sounds like good. Sounds like good to me. So let's see. There's only a couple people there, so if they'll allow us to come along, that could be fun. All right. Oh, hey, it's working. All right, guys. We're going to go be raiding to eBook, I believe. They are reading The Witcher, or one of the Witcher books. So, let's go say hello and maybe get some new interesting books in. Until next time, thank you very much for joining us, and have a wonderful night. Bye now.
Going back to your roots after a long break. Hey, thank you so much.